Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. We'll just give it a few moments and wait for others to arrive. Yeah, guess we can start. So welcome and thanks for coming to today's Pearson English Assessment Summer Session. Every Tuesday this summer, we've been exploring different aspects of English assessment and how we at Pearson English approach the question of how assessment can be used to support and drive success at each stage of the journey to proficiency. In today's webinar, we'll be asking how digital assessment can help to direct and refine the teaching of young learners. And we'll be hearing from Dr. Jenny Liontou. Jenny is Assistant Professor of Applied Linguistics at the National and Cappadostrian University of Athens, specialising in EFL Testing and Assessment. She's worked as a research assistant, expert item consultant, freelance item writer, oral examiner and script writer for various national and international examination boards. Her current research interests include theoretical and practical issues of testing and assessing foreign language competence, computational linguistics and classroom-based assessment. Jenny is a great presenter, so this will be really informative, enjoyable session. So just a quick bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please feel free to submit your questions and comments to Jenny in the chat box at any time during the talk. If you can use the chat box rather than the questions box, Jenny will be able to see your chat. She can't access the questions box, so please use the chat box. This webinar will be recorded and we'll make it available shortly after the session on our website in case you'd like to share it with colleagues. And you'll also receive a certificate of attendance via email after the session. So that's it. Now I'm happy to pass it over to you.
So hello everybody. It's always a pleasure and honor being with colleagues from sunny and extremely hot Athens today. Let me start with a much quoted picture. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Do you think this is a kind of fair selection? Can you type questions in the chat box? Is there anything wrong with this statement? Because everybody keeps asking why? So obviously, I cannot see your answers, your comments. So fair selection cannot take place here because obviously there's nothing fair as regards the fees. The fees is not given equal access to assessment, and in most of the cases we need to think of our students' special abilities and needs and adjust our assessment accordingly. So I would like to ask you, what kind of testing methods do you normally use with your students and for what purpose? How do you normally assess your students? Would be nice to have some input. I will wait for Sophia to forward your answers.
I think there's a problem with the chat box. So everything's coming through in the questions box, which I don't think you can see. So,
okay, so I will move on and I will answer and get back to our colleagues later.
Yeah.
So, along with that, I imagine that most of you would use tests, standardized ones, for diagnostic or placement purposes, and then you would design any kind of multiple choice questions, I would expect, or open-ended questions for progress for monitoring your students, and normally some kind of exit test. What we would like to talk about today, because we're dealing with young learners and we wish to address this specific age group in the best possible way, is formative assessment. And by formative assessment, we do not wish to include or have in mind only testing, but actually the systematic ongoing process to gather evidence about their learning. We need to use data collected through different ways of assessment to identify our students' current level of knowledge and skills, and to adapt our lessons to help the student reach their learning goals. Why is that important? Because we are dealing with young learners who keep developing, and this is the time, the stage they keep learning. So in formative assessment, students are participants and leaders in their own assessment, sharing learning goals and understanding how their learning is progressing and what next steps they need to take and how to take them. We normally assess our students for different reasons. Hopefully, we wish to know where they stand in relation to the material presented to them. At the same time, we wish them to become more self-aware of their abilities and skills. We need to find out more about their abilities, knowledge, and skills in order to adjust our teaching practices, spot their strengths and weaknesses in order to spend more time working on their weaknesses and improving those gaps. Hopefully the data we get should feed back our teaching and learning process, aiming at its improvement and effectiveness. And finally, we need to give some kind of feedback to parents, principals, directors of studies, and we need to provide evidence of this feedback. So, as teachers, we are normally asked to do many different things. No matter the institution, we might have to design the syllabus or even adapt it to a specific curriculum. We might have to plan our lessons, because every year we will have different types of students. And in most of the cases around the world, we are dealing with mixed ability classrooms. We need to align any existing material to specific learning objectives, because our students keep changing. Things we have created and used one year will have to be adjusted to a new group of students. We should create assessments and learning materials that are at the right level, understand what our students should be learning at each level, provide evidence to school administration about our students' progress, and what I already mentioned, give feedback to students and parents. So at the same time, while doing all this, asked to cope with such responsibilities, we have to teach, and we have long sessions and demands placed on us. So what can we do? We cannot, I feel that this is extreme workload. We are asked to combine teaching with assessment. We are asked to adjust the materials we use. We are asked to provide evidence of all the work that takes place inside our classroom. Is there any way to get help? Living in a digital era, I would say that the way we learn in our society is based around communication. And the way society operates is that more and more of our communication is digital. We learned it the hard way over the past 4 months. Challenging times ask for radical decisions and changes. Digital means are changing inevitably the way knowledge work is done in our society. One of the most obvious benefits is the flexibility of delivery of information, and the fact that using digital means could make our students, could provide them the opportunity for more diverse learning experience. But although the need and value of a wider and more representative range of assessment data in our classrooms is widely recognized, EFL teachers are still uncertain as regards using digital tools to collect useful data on their students' learning ability. And I think they are worried because there's not sufficient evidence of the validity and reliability of available tools. And by digital tools, I mean not just online possibilities, online testing tools, but applications you can download and use with your students. So if we wish to think about the positive features of digital testing, we cannot ignore the fact that learning and assessment can occur at times that are more convenient and productive for both students and teachers. And I need to highlight convenient here, because people working with young learners know how fast they get tired, how quickly, how easily they change from one activity to the next, how difficult it is for them to keep being concentrated for a long time. So we wish to have valid data, but the time we administer something to our students might not be the most appropriate for them. So the data we will collect might not be valid and reliable, might not represent what they can actually do. When using digital means of assessment, students can work at their own pace within obviously a given framework, time framework. And the online assessment process can be broken into smaller, more frequent portions of time. This is again extremely important because young learners get easily tired. They can pause and resume later. They can do one part of the test and come back and finish the rest at another day and time. They can even reflect in between the different sections. This flexibility of location should be treated or should be perceived as a facilitating factor. Digital resources give learning a new relevance to contemporary society as well, and professional and industry practice. We keep asking our students to become more digitally literate, to develop all these kind of skills expected in modern society. At the same time, we are expected to create opportunities to access and share information more easily and readily while joining online communities. And using online resources and digital resources can be a way to create this kind of online communities, to bring our students together. And with the support of teachers and parents, share ideas, knowledge, experiences with their classmates and people from other places. Obviously, access to technology is not always easy, and in some cases, students and teachers may not, for example, have reliable access and everyday access to appropriate technology. We need to think about, and I'm dealing with online access here, because we should not take it for granted that our students have stable and fast internet connection. We should be able to give them access to information in a versatile and flexible way. Sometimes online systems are too overwhelming. We need to have some how-to guides. We need to make sure that if our students will, for example, work on a digital test online on their own, they should be able to get this help on their own. Which means if we ask them to become autonomous, we should create the conditions to facilitate this free kind of work. Any information they get should be clear enough. In other words, they should be guided throughout the process. Otherwise, they will become anxious, confused, if not properly directed, helped, supported. And we need to make sure that the tools give them this information. Not all students and teachers have regular or reliable access to the internet, which means that instead of using an online tool, we could think of whether there are any applications they can download and use regardless of internet availability. Some technologies and tools require training. We need to make sure that the tools we choose, because we're dealing with young learners, share features with applications they're familiar with in their everyday life. And sometimes when teachers or students do not find peer support for their online initiatives, they can feel isolated. So we need to make sure that we create opportunities for them to come back and report to their classmates, and they get the support. So we want them to work on their own, but we as teachers should get sufficient data for presentation in a classroom. Young learners are a special group of learners. I have spent years teaching them, and I've really enjoyed this challenging opportunity. As you all know, this is a very demanding group of learners. All learners are demanding, but these young ones can get bored quickly. They are meaning-oriented. They wish we need to clarify, explain clearly to them the purpose of an activity. They enjoy discovering things on their own. They prefer and they take pleasure out of it. They're proud of themselves when they discover new things. They prefer concrete activities, one step at a time. They are more egocentric. Egocentricity is pretty important here. They wish to be treated as the center of the world. They wish to receive full attention. They are imaginative. They tend to imitate a lot. Imitation is important here because imitation comes or is quite similar to repetition, and we can take advantage of imitation when learning. At the same time, they have short attention span. They respond well to praising. So they need to get reward whenever they do something. They enjoy imitating and are skillful at listening accurately and repeating what they have heard. And most importantly, they enjoy learning through playing. So if these are the kind of characteristics we normally try to address when teaching, our assessment practices should be similar to our teaching practices, because the way we teach should resemble what we try to assess. We cannot teach them in one way and then use a completely different format when assessing them. We need to address and take into consideration their characteristics and the way they have been exposed to this kind of knowledge. So when assessing young learners, we should consider their age, language, conceptual and social development, their skills we wish to assess, and clarify vocabulary and language expected at a specific level. Because of their age, we should think of how positive such an experience can be to them, and how we can use the outcomes to motivate them, to keep them involved, and not because you know that they will get pleasure. How can they get pleasure out of something that might show their weaknesses, since they do not enjoy this kind of negative praising? How can we actually keep them motivated? And how the feedback we get as teachers can help us plan more effective lessons. The evidence we get in order to plan more effective lessons, the tools we use should be valid and reliable, and should highlight specific areas. Is there a way, for example, I would like to know specific things I need to use, and specific learning objectives I need to address for a specific student. So I would like to get this individualized feedback from a test. I would like to know whether, for example, Mary is good at reading short texts and answering to specific information questions, but she needs more help, and I should make an informed decision. She needs more help with inference questions. Time invested on their weaknesses, working on their weaknesses, instead of a general kind of reading score or listening score. This a general kind of score does not give me gives me an overall idea of competence on the specific skill. But as a teacher, I would like to have more concrete, specific information. And at the same time, assessment, what I mentioned earlier, should be in harmony with learning. And since their learning is interactional rather than isolated, their assessment should involve some kind of interaction. So I will present you the tool, a tool developed by Pearson. I'm checking time at the same time because of my shared screen. This is a Pearson webinar, but I will present you features of the specific test, and these are the features you might wish to keep in mind when looking at other applications as well. So Pearson English Benchmark is an English test for young learners delivered on a tablet, which means that you can download it, students can download it and take the test whenever convenient to them. It measures speaking, listening, reading and writing skills in a fun and game-like way. It addresses 6 levels, and there are 5 tests available per level, which means that students can take a different version of the test after some time. It has been designed for students between 6 and 13 years old. What students get when they finish the test is a score based on the Common European Framework and the global scale of English. The results obviously are available within minutes, and you as a teacher can get the full report. But what is more important, and I have used this tool to carry out research, the feedback you get is available as can-do statements for learners, which means that we get a list of what each student can or cannot do. And based on the statements, we can adapt our teaching material. Parents can get full reports and students can get their certificates. And because you get this detailed reporting, you can get at the same time free recommendations for what to teach next. I will show you examples. So obviously the test can be used as a diagnostic test at the beginning of the school year to obtain a baseline measure of the student's English proficiency, identify learning needs and help inform your instruction, or supplement, get ideas, useful feedback to adjust your instruction. You can monitor your students' progress throughout the year, and this kind of monitoring is the most important and valuable information I would like to have as a teacher, to monitor their progress. And finally, it can be used as a predictor of your students' success on formal examinations. So yes, obviously, you can use it for your students to become aware with other high-stakes exams, such as Pearson Test of English Young Learners or Cambridge English Young Learners. Let me show you how the test, the application actually works. So first of all, what is interesting is that this is where they get the time limit. So every time they choose a test, the test of their level, they have first of all an example presented to them. So before even doing the activity, they get instructions on how to cope with the activity. Or they have the time limit indicator here. So even students with low concentration span can are informed about the time, and they are in a way controlled, but in a friendly way. They get reading activities, different forms of reading activities based on their level and age, and they can even have integrated activities. What you can see here is an integrated reading to writing activity. So they simply drag and drop to form sentences in order, for example, to describe a picture. And every time, this is important, every time they submit their answers, they get feedback in a friendly way. Would you like, so they don't feel this kind, they do not feel intimidated because their peers might make fun of them, or they don't get this kind of formal feedback from their teacher. They can correct themselves and try again with a different kind of option. And because a pool of answers is possible, of correct answers, this means that they can become more imaginative and creative. How we can teach them and test their writing skills. That they can get a list of words, depending again on their level, and they will have to drag and drop the word to the right place. for example, in a sentence. They love this kind of activities because it is a way, it's like a game, you know, like gut feeling. And if it doesn't fit here, they can try something else. Or they might get a longer kind of story and they have to put a sentence in the right place. As they move on, they will have obviously to create their own writing. They get the keyboard and they are asked to describe pictures, elaborate on them, or add their own ideas. Listening, touching, listen to a specific word and identify the right word. Or this is a nice kind of activity I have tried out with groups of students. They listen to specific instructions and they have to do what they're asked to do. So, for example, move the red crayon next to the mountain picture, or they play around while listening. Different forms of writing. They can describe pictures, or they can create what I told you earlier, reading to writing. They can create their new kind of stories and sentences. So if they manage, using their imagination, if they actually produce a correct sentence, not the expected one by the system, but a correct sentence, it would be graded as correct. There is not one correct answer only. Writing can become more creative. They might get a picture and expected to fill in the gap with the word they know. Or as the level gets higher, they will be asked to produce different types of texts. A keyboard appears and they just type into their sentences. Speaking that, what is important here is that everything is recorded. So you can even get scripts, oral scripts, audio files of their production, especially when it gets a bit longer. Sometimes they will have to imagine a kind of discussion, or they will have to describe a photo, or later on they can drag and drop. So listening and speaking are integrated as well. What is the report? And this is what I think as teachers we should pay attention to. This is a sample of an individualized report. What you get here is the performance of your student per skill, a summary, and recommended activities. And we're dealing with a validated test, so we can rely on the information we get. For example, the student here can understand the main information in short, informal conversations on familiar topics, but he or she needs to practice more at listening. Details in dialogues and monologues on familiar topics. So you know that introduce guessing the meaning of unfamiliar words from context is something you have to do with this specific student. Obviously, you will get recommended activities for the group of your students, which means that then you can group them together and adapt material to fit the needs of the majority of your students, along with any kind of individualized instruction. For reading, you get the specific summary, can read a short text and predict what they think will happen next, can follow the sequence of events. You see what you get here you get a list of learning objectives. At the same time, you get recommended activities. This student needs to read longer narratives and practice guessing meaning, and you get recommended activities per level of performance, not generalized ones. So if your students sit for A1 level test, these are expected objectives for the specific level. You would not obviously wish to get recommended activities that are expected to be performed later on, and skills and sub-skills your students should acquire at a different level. You wish to address their needs based on their level of competence. And as I don't know whether you're familiar with Global Scale of English, it's a free online tool. I keep using it with the students, and I suggest you give it a go because I find it amazing what you can do with a global and how you can use it in your classroom in any kind of setting. The Global Scale of English is an elaboration of the learning objectives presented in the Common European Framework of Reference. And what I mean an elaboration because of the detailed objectives included. You know that in the Common European Framework, we get the descriptors per level of competence and per skill. The Global Scale of English includes much more detailed descriptors. For example, if you check for the A2 level, you can get the general descriptors, and as we move on, you can get specific ones per score. So, for example, if they get 30 points in the benchmark test, you know what they can do in terms of reading. You have a list of different learning objectives. Or if they can get 31, you see how detailed your feedback can become. You can use this information to inform parents, to inform, most importantly, students. You can use this information to adjust your instruction. So your student got 31. She can identify key information, can follow a simple dialogue about familiar everyday activities, can follow basic instructions on how to play a simple board game. But in order to move on to 32 and 33, we need to improve, address specific skills. This is free. And if you combine the global scale, which is free and you can download, with a teacher toolkit, I will share it with you in a minute, you can have a score with activities prepared for you. So once you choose the specific level of students and a specific sub-skill you wish to address, you get task sheets you can use with your students. I'm sorry, I have no access to you. I don't know whether you have questions, but we'll come back to everything in the end.
I think, Jenny, if you can see somewhere, I'm allocating questions to you, so somewhere you should be able to access them. But if not, don't worry, we can come back at the end.
Cannot see anything, right? Questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, when I can now see your questions, but when I see your questions, I cannot read my presentation. It's a huge panel. Exactly.
Don't worry. If you prefer, we can do it at the end, whichever's easier for you.
Yeah, better. We're in the end.
Okay.
How was the global scale created? Obviously, there are many. We're not here to support one thing. It is a Pearson webinar, and we wish to talk about this tool because I have used it to carry out research. There are many other tools you can use. What is important, and what I can claim as an academic, is that no matter the tool you choose to use, pay attention to specific features that should be present. The specific global scale was used following years of work with teachers and educators. A team of test writers developed items based on this feedback, and then the can-do statements were created for the global scale of English. We test the test by getting real-life sample responses from students around the world, and people in person keep refining the machine scoring engines so they can accurately predict how teachers should score the test. I would show you part of the research I have carried out with students in primary education. We tried to investigate whether using this specific application and tablets, EFL teachers can better monitor their students' progress and take advantage of the formative information it provides to advise their learning plans, both in short and longer terms. So we used the tool with 60 young EFL learners. They were all 12 years old, of an A2 level. They were purposefully selected from a larger number of students. The test was administered to them at the beginning of the school year to obtain a baseline measure of their actual English proficiency and ensure that the level of their proficiency was comparable. And what we did was actually an experimental approach to teaching. The experimental group, 30 students, received informed instruction on reading and listening throughout the year based on their individual reports. The control group kept using the assigned course book, but with no specific adjustments. Both groups were taught by the same EFL teacher, using the same course book, following student interviews and teacher observation forms and interviews. Preliminary findings, based on our research questions, obviously, we wanted to see if there is a significant impact on our students' reading and listening competence based on this informed instruction and constructive feedback. We tried to investigate their attitudes towards tablet-based testing. That was before COVID, so students were not familiar with any kind of tablet-based activities. And we also tried to investigate our teachers' attitudes towards this kind of tablet-based testing. Preliminary findings indicated over a year a significant difference between the experimental and the control group in terms of the change in the reading scores in the pre and post test. Obviously, a lot of research and more research is done and is under development. We keep monitoring this group of students, and we have been doing research now with 10 and 11 years old students. We would like to monitor them over a period of 3 years. So I would like to share with you a video. This comes from one of our students, a real person. He has been diagnosed with the HDH syndrome, officially diagnosed. He was afraid of doing a test in front of the others because he is very competitive and he didn't wish to be humiliated. He would never speak in front of his classmates in English. He received informed instruction based on his scores in the benchmark test. And I would like to share with you a video with his performance in speaking after a year. A very young learner. Everything is on the spot, no script, and he actually wanted to do this. He wanted to talk about a book he read. To get to that level, to read a book on his own, and a graded reader, obviously, was something he had never done before. His motivation increased over the year because he got individualized instruction. Okay, I'm really impressed because I have been monitoring this kid for the past 4 years. As you know, children with HDH syndrome are extremely clever, but they need this kind of support, individualized support, psychological support, and motivation. And because of their limited attention span, they need extra time and control time on specific activities. So, as teachers, I would say that we keep trying, and I always remember when talking to colleagues of this little bird in the middle of the forest. The owl asks the sparrow, "What are you doing, bird? Why are you running to the sea? Why are you carrying water with your beak? You can't save the forest, run." And the bird will answer, "I'm doing the best I can with what I have." So I hope this is what we all try to do. Keep doing the best you can with what you have, and I hope we'll meet again, and keep safe in the meantime.
That was great, Jenny. Thank you so much. So there are some questions that have come in for you. If you can have a little look on your questions pane. I've highlighted the ones that, that I thought would be interesting.
What is the difference between a syllabus and a curriculum? A curriculum is the formal document normally issued by a government, the Ministry of Education, stating general aims, the philosophy, the ideology behind foreign language teaching, whereas the syllabus in theory is a more detailed document used by teachers. So we create and different institutions or schools will have a different syllabus based on the curriculum. How would the teachers guide the students for the writing test? If you mean the online one, they don't need to guide them because these special examples are provided to them online. Apart from the writing work, you would need to do with your students in your classroom. If you get the learning objectives, though, from the global scale, you can decide on the steps you can take to move from simple, you need to have an idea of their progress over the years and the expectations. These are the learning objectives. So we start normally with putting words together, forming simple sentences, moving on to more complex sentences and different types of text produced. Standardized tests, nowadays, they cannot obviously account for individual differences, but what you get from standardized tests nowadays is more, and many examination boards try to do that. You get a more detailed profile. Now you can get their scores per skill as before, and sometimes they can provide you with more detailed feedback. For example, in Pearson, they do that. Creativity at one hand, but at the same time, I got a question whether creativity can be combined with a wrong answer when you describe a picture. So they will get a credit, the system, everything is automatically scored. So obviously they might get a point for forming a proper sentence, but not the maximum score because of the lack of responding or describing the specific picture. Yes, you can use the benchmark test with any coursebook because it is not coursebook based, and other tests available online. They are level specific. So if you wish to diagnose, monitor, or assess the level of your students, you will use any of these tests. I don't know whether it is available. It is in English language. You don't need to relate it to the global scale of English because you can, it has been calibrated to the Common European Framework of Reference. Specific sessions, you can address them in different ways. For example, if you get, let's imagine that you get a report of a group of students and you do some preliminary analysis and similar activities are recommended for a specific skill, let's say reading skill. So you know that you can design a group of activities for this specific group of students. You cannot have private sessions in that sense, but you can go for individualized instruction in groups. Tablets only for the time being, I'm afraid, but I think they are working on, you have to ask Pearson for that. I think they work on smartphones these days. It is definitely an application that can be used on a tablet.
It's just tablets at the moment, yeah.
I used to have an interaction with my colleagues, but this was not possible today.
Is that all the questions? Are we waiting for any more questions to come in?
I think I have answered most of them. They can get back to me. They have my email. It was a pleasure being with you today. I hope you've enjoyed it.
It was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Jenny. Yeah, really informative and engaging. So thank you very much for that, and thank you everyone for joining and taking part. You'll receive an email shortly with a recording of the session and your certificate. Please take a look at the rest of our assessment summer sessions programme. We're halfway through at the moment, but there's still plenty more to sign up for. They're free, they're running every Tuesday until the 8th of September. So take a look, they're on our website, and hope to see you at another one very soon. And we'll close it there then. Thanks very much indeed. You too. Bye.
Bye.